Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's topic is key elements of change management, and I am joined here today with two of my colleagues. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Smita Vadakekalam. She is our COO and Senior Strategist here at Heller Consulting. And we also have Zikatanova, who is a Senior Strategist and Project and Consulting Manager also here at Heller Consulting. Both Smita and Rally are certified change management experts, and they are here today to share some key elements that we have seen success in practice with our clients. And I'd love to share a little bit more about both Smita and Rally. So Smita, if you could tell us a little bit more about your experience with change management.
Sure. Thank you, Kaya. It's great to be here. We're really excited to share our best practices and lessons learned in the field of change management. I help lead and develop the change management practice here at Heller, and I'm also involved with the National Change Management Association of Professionals, ACMP.
Wonderful. Thank you, Smita. And Rally, would you mind sharing just a little bit about your change management experience?
Sure, thanks, Kaya. Hi, everyone. Also very excited to be here today to share some info with you. As Kaya mentioned, my name is Rally, and in my role at Heller as a project manager and a senior strategist, I work with many of our multi-year, multi-phase implementation projects, which have strategic components as well for changing processes as well as the systems that are used. And I lead those organizations and those projects that are chock full of change. So I'm excited to share some of what I've learned along the way.
Great. Thank you both for being here. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Smita to get us started on the presentation.
Right. So we want to tell you a little bit about what perspective we offer when it comes to change management, and we want to do this by sharing the company's origin story. So Heller Consulting started in the dark ages in 1993 with our founder, Keith Heller, working at the Exploratorium in the Bay Area. He was famously known for printing out membership cards from Razor's Edge DOS and building out robust user manuals. Word got out and Keith's talents, and he started getting phone calls from other nonprofits to help them use their system. So Keith would train and streamline the system and develop business processes to meet fundraising strategies. In one of these critical client meetings, Keith recalls working with a client. He was training on the volunteer module, and then the client started to get upset and cry. She was really worried that she couldn't keep up with this new technology. That experience for Keith laid the foundation of how we approach projects that still rings true today, which is that we keep people at the center of every technology project. And we do this today by the discipline of change management. So even though what we do today looks different and we're dealing with much more complex technology ecosystems and sophisticated CRM implementations, we truly believe that people are at the center of this. And our investment in change management guarantees greater project success, user adoption, and organizations realizing their future state and benefits much quicker. So we have a little bit over 30 minutes to really delve into a deep field of change management. And we're going to do this today by cherry picking some of the concepts and tools in change management that we believe are must-haves and are based on our knowledge of this discipline and our experiences with working with organizations over the years. We believe these tools that we're going to go over today can be scaled up and down appropriately from a small change to a very large change and can be tweaked and adjusted as necessary. So this field is very deep and there's a lot to it. But what we're going to start with today is do some level setting, talk about what change management is and why, and then really get into some practical tools and leave you with some resources and next steps.
Great. So as Smita mentioned, we're going to introduce change management first, just to level set, get everyone on the same page. And it's a meant to give everyone that foundation, the understanding of the purpose of change management as well. I want to start with just saying that change management is a discipline that is very, very large and broad, just like anthropology or sociology. There's lots of different ways to approach it, different lenses to look at it through. So we have used our experience in the sector with organizations and on the projects we've been on, as well as the experience we have being certified practitioners to bring that all together for what might actually work. So we are coming from that perspective. And we look at structured approaches. There are tools and strategies you apply in a project that is going to result in a change in systems that are used and in the way people do their work day to day. It's not just about a budget and a timeline, deadlines, that kind of thing, and the scope of a project. Those are the mechanics of it. Those are the pieces of the puzzle, or in an analogy we like to use, that's what it takes to build the boat, if the boat is your project. But really the end goal of building the boat is getting people in the boat and sailing somewhere. And change management is the part where you're getting the people in the boat and they understand why and where they're going. So that's where we're coming from when we talk about change management. A simple definition of change management, which comes from the Association of Change Management Professionals, or the ACMP, is change management is the practice of applying a structured approach to the transition of an organization from a current state to a future state to achieve expected benefits. That's the recognized definition of change management. Great. So why is it important? Well, first, it can increase the likelihood of project success. Second, it provides tools, actual tangible things you can do, actions you can take, tools you can apply for managing resistance to a project and its outcomes. And lastly, it can reduce turnover. These are three very specific things that research in change management shows change management benefiting, right? It results in these things. In my experience, in our experience at Heller, it's really translates to building long-term sustainability at your organization. The success of a single individual change, one project, is very important. It can be a very large project, let's say a CRM implementation for 3 to 5 departments. That is transformational in and of itself, just getting a new system in place. But that single change and everyone's experience as part of that project actually contributes as a building block to how they will react to any future change that they experience at the organization as well. So if it's a positive experience, then the next time a project comes up, they'll automatically think about the last time a change happened and apply that positive feeling to how they feel about going into this new adventure. If it's a negative experience, the same thing can happen. They look back on that experience and it's a negative kind of maybe outlook they have, a conclusion they've already drawn about how it's going to go. So each individual change is important all by itself in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve with it. But building all changes together on top of each other, that's really where the impact is of having change management be a part of all of those projects and endeavors. It creates this culture of change that is positive, so that going into something new, everyone collectively feels positive about that. And right now, that's more critical than ever. In 2020, we've had an interesting year with a lot of changes that some of them might not have felt like a choice this year. So a lot of changes like that are also breaking down to be more bite-sized. We might be starting to look at projects that are a little smaller for shorter term, and those changes are, I like to see each of them as an opportunity to continue to build a positive change culture. So the more opportunities we have for that, the more we're establishing that long-term sustainability and culture of change as a positive thing. The value of change management is illustrated by this graph that you see on your screen. There are two lines that you can see. One dips further down. It's a teal blue kind of color, if you see that color. And the other one is a little bit above that. It's a greenish kind of color. The lower one and the one above it both represent the same thing. It's what we call the productivity dip. And no matter what, in any change, there is going to be a dip in productivity for the staff that are experiencing the change. By nature of changing your database, you are having to learn what keys on your keyboard achieve something that you used to do with a different set of keys on your keyboard. So it's going to take a little bit of time to learn the shortcuts and your way around no matter what. With change management, the value is actually that it shortens the duration of the dip. So it's not as long, you can see that in the graph, and it's not as deep. If you set expectations from the very start with the people who are leading your change, your sponsors, and those that are in charge, as well as with the people who are contributing to it and those that will be impacted by it, the ones that will use the technology in the end, set those expectations that that dip will happen. You can proactively plan to maybe hire some part-time resources to help during launch so that everyone has enough time for learning those new keyboard shortcuts and that kind of thing. It really helps you plan. It acknowledges it's going to happen. You can't sweep it under the rug, and it helps you plan for it so that you can be successful in the long run.
So one thing that we have been doing at Heller over the years is tracking how popular or if change management has been adopted by the nonprofit sector. And what we have seen is that there is a trend. We do see that nonprofit organizations are starting to invest in change management, which is wonderful. And we do believe this is going to be a critical skill set in the future, and especially in managing technology projects. But there are some common misconceptions that we want to dispel. One of those misconceptions is that you have to do it all or nothing, an all or nothing mentality, and just really like to encourage folks to understand that something is better than nothing. And with change management to another, I think misconception is that you have to be certified or you have to follow, the methodology to a T. It's different in this respect than project management. It's more important to embrace or understand the concepts and to scale appropriately and adjust it to your organization. So it doesn't require, following it by like the T. It's important to adjust and to really embrace these concepts. And, another misconception is that only large organizations with a lot of time and money need to do this or can do this, and that's not necessarily true. Different organizations will do this differently. Maybe at a large complex organization you will have resources, change managers within the in the project, maybe a change management office, but then in small organizations could apply some of these concepts we're talking about. Maybe there's the person running the project, or the other day I was talking to a CIO who who had launched a new technology, a new CRM 2 years ago, and he was talking about what he did. And what he did to apply change management was have his staff, including his business leaders, not just IT, engage in a 2-day change management training at the start of the project. It was a wonderful way to set expectations about what a technology project involves for those business leaders who maybe have never been through a CRM project. It was great. In reflecting after 2 years after launch, he said it made a big difference. It gave that organization a common language to talk about change management, to understand things that Rally just showed us, that productivity dip, that at launch there will be a productivity dip, and to understand that so that there are no surprises and they can manage that change and disruption effectively. So that's another example of how you can apply this. That was a great example. So there's many different ways to do this. And last, I'd like to say is, this stuff does feel like common sense. And even those of us who study this and talk about this, it's not necessarily intuitive. If you don't plan it, you may forget about it. So be very intentional with change management. It's really important to plan and think through this. And that's what we're going to go over, is talking about some of those tools. So we're going to dive into this section and talk about the tools. And we're going to start with the why statement. And this is a really simple concept, but very critical. Your why statement paints the picture of the future state. It explains the why you are changing and why now. And this is how you're going to connect the mission of your organization to the why statement. This is an opportunity to make sure the vision of your project is clear. And this is how you're going to sell the case to your organization and users. This is how you're going to get buy-in. And you're doing this to build endurance, support, and resilience with your team. Now more than ever, as we talked about earlier, people need reasons as to why they are doing something, and that needs to be aspirational. We now are inundated with lots of priorities, and we are constantly reprioritizing, and it's really important to understand why we're spending time on something. So this statement, the why statement, gets repeated over and over again throughout a project. It's a reminder of what we're shooting for. And it's really simple, and hopefully doesn't require a lot of explanation. But one thing you want to avoid is, if you don't have a why statement, you don't want people coming up with their own versions of that, because sometimes that could lead to behavior or actions that don't benefit the project. I think it's really important to think about, if you have one, is there room for improvement? Take a look at your current why statement and see, is it inspirational? Is it aspirational? Does it connect to the mission of your organization? Is it clear? Is it easy to communicate? And is this a statement that your sponsors and others can internalize and communicate in their own word, in their own voice? Is it active voice? And you want to right size the statement, and you want to make sure it's not too broad but not too specific. You want something in the middle. And I'm going to show you an example of maybe a good why statement and then a better one. So on screen here, we have a statement. And I would say this is a why statement that was used as an organization. It is simple. It's easy to communicate. It does reflect the why we're moving. But it wasn't aspirational. We weren't getting everyone involved in the project really motivated. And the organization made a couple of tweaks, and they came up with, I would say, a better version of the why statement. So here's a better version. We are moving to a new CRM to grant more wishes to children. And as you can see, it's a very simple tweak, but it really has that important element, the aspirational element, the part that really connects to the mission of the organization. And this really did make a difference with the organization we worked with. We got much more engagement with this project by making a little tweak. So we have a template, and here's a little screenshot that is available on our website if you need help crafting a why statement. I would also say that if you have friends in fundraising, communications, or PR, utilize their skill sets to help you craft your why statement. But here's one, and we'll share with you at the end of the session how you can access it. It's just really important, to take a moment, even if you're in the middle of a project, maybe towards the end, at the beginning, to just take a moment to just think about, do you have a why statement in the first place? Can you, if you're thinking about your project, think about what it is, and is it a good why statement? And is there room for improvement? And it's never too late to improve your why statement and start using it. The other concept we want to talk about is sponsorship, which is a critical element to change management. I learned my lesson hard on this one. Several years ago, I thought we could ignore this one because I really thought all sponsors needed to do was sign a check and show up maybe once in a while. But I learned the hard way in that an inactive sponsor can really make or break a project, while an active sponsor is the secret ingredient to success. So this is interestingly backed up by statistics, by ProSci, which is a research organization that does studies globally on projects for many years. And the data has shown us that the last 10 years, the number 1 or 2 success factor for any project is an active and visible sponsor. So it is critical. We realize that sponsorship does matter. And that's why we do have it in our kind of our toolkit of best practices. A sponsor, as I mentioned, does more than sign a check. It's someone in leadership who is influential. It's someone who can keep people accountable and communicate the vision, and people will actually listen to them. And people in leadership, another important thing to remember is that people in leadership right now need your support. So it's important to support your sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, I would suggest get one. You want to figure out who might be the right person who has that influence and who can commit to your project. And you want to check if you have the right sponsor. Now, I do want to share a little tip here. We've seen work really well with organizations where maybe you have a sponsor and they're not that great, but you politically really can't boot them out or replace them. Well, another hack to that is get another sponsor, have 2 sponsors. And that actually is a model that works very well, co-sponsorship or a sponsorship matrix. And what you do with that in that scenario is you utilize and leverage each sponsor's strengths. So maybe the sponsor who is not that great, maybe you keep them a little bit inactive, and the sponsor who you handpicked becomes a really active sponsor. That's a sort of a workaround that we've seen work really well. But the most important thing about working with a sponsor is setting expectations up front, creating a cadence with your sponsor with meetings, whether that be biweekly or weekly, making sure you have a roadmap for the sponsor so they understand the responsibilities and expectations of the jobs, and the actions you expect them to participate throughout the project. And that is really critical. And that is what makes effective sponsorship. If you're able to regularly meet with your sponsor and understand how you're going to leverage them throughout the project, and understand when the project is going tough, how can you leverage your sponsor? When things are going well, how can your sponsor reinforce certain messages, reward folks for good work on the project? And the important thing is that there is a team to support sponsorship. It's not one or the other. There's a collaborative effort. So really think about how your sponsors can be a critical tool for your project throughout, and how you can leverage your sponsors on your project.
Great. Smita's talked about 2 checklist items, a why statement and sponsorship, and I'd like to cover one other one, reinforcement. And when I say reinforcement, I mean making sure people understand and are rewarded for participating actively and engaging in being a part of this change that is happening. Reinforcement, oftentimes I think we think about like a blowout party at launch or something like that, and that certainly is a good form of reinforcement. Having that reward at the finish line feels really, really good, but it is a critical piece of the puzzle that we often see is overlooked, sometimes even at the end of a project. It's overlooked, but on small and big project, it is consistently overlooked throughout the project. And that's the piece that I really want to raise today as something to be thinking about consistently on your change management checklist. It's incredibly important, reinforcement is, for individual changes to stick. And as I talked about before, those individual changes are what contribute to a change culture at your organization. So the individual occurrence just builds on itself. And the only way to impact that org culture in a positive direction for change is to have changes that transform your business be seen as positive individually. So there's a lot of different things that an individual person or groups like a team interpret as meaningful reward or reinforcement. That's just going to vary, right? Like from person to person, we know that. And we've seen things from a staff lunch for a group to the equivalent of a spa day for everyone that's involved, to maybe a comped day off or a half day off, iPads as rewards for things that are part of a, maybe a bit of a competition during the project. But it really doesn't have to be a big gesture, and I would categorize those more in the big gesture kind of category. And it doesn't have to be a one-time thing. One of my favorite examples of reinforcement is a project I was on. The project manager that I was working with was meeting bi-weekly with a committee of team members who were designated decision makers for their respective team and department. And their departments were participating in this project, so they would come together for governance purposes to make sure that decisions were being made in alignment with the organization's priorities. And this project manager always brought a snack, something for people to have on hand. Sometimes it was those little, mandarin orange cuties or whatever. And early on in the project, she found out that one of the most vocal participants in those biweekly meetings was vocal for both positive change and to represent for her individual department's needs, so sometimes resistant to other things. That person mentioned that she loves trail mix with chocolate in it, and because of the chocolate in it, and it was her absolute favorite thing. So the project manager on that project kind of filed that away, and you can bet that every single one of those meetings going forward had trail mix with chocolate in it, and it was the littlest thing. That person would walk in the door and say, oh my gosh, the chocolate trail mix, and automatically have a positive attitude going into the rest of the meeting. So it's little things that are not one time necessarily that can make the biggest impact in terms of reinforcement. And reinforce that the change is palatable, that it's doable, that it can be positive, and put everyone in that mindset going into maybe tough discussions that day. This is a word cloud that is the result of a poll that we've done with staff from various organizations. I think it was about 100 participants that we did it with. And this is what came up in the word cloud for ideas for reinforcement. The question we asked is at the top of the slide. What are ideas you have or ways that you've done or been a part of reinforcement? And you can see the biggest words on here are gift cards, flexibility, and then pizza and lunch are kind of tied. So those are the biggest ones, and they're not big grand gestures. It's not a blowout bash at the end of a project. The gift card, I think just the gesture of the gift card, you can see there's no dollar amount associated with any of these, is really what did it. And I think there's a lot of versions in the smaller words that I'd like to call out that are related to shout outs or recognition to a larger audience. So maybe something in an all staff meeting or in a newsletter of some kind, just that recognition about hitting milestones and who enabled that to happen is a really great reward and reinforcement that's meaningful to many people.
Thank you, Rally. So we just covered a lot of material. We did basically a crash course, cherry picked some of the important concepts. And here's just a quick summary of those concepts. Make sure you have a good why statement. First, check if you have one and see if there's room for improvement. Make sure it's aspirational, clear, and reinforce and reinforce. Get your sponsors on board. If you don't have a sponsor, get one. If you do, make sure you're leveraging your sponsor throughout the project during tough times and good times. And reinforcements, what we just talked about, meaningful actions to your organization, and think about plan your reinforcements. Don't take it for granted. And last, one that we did not mention, but we do believe is the most important, check in with yourself. This work is it's really important. It's important to understand what your role is in the change and how you're going to impact the success of the change. Change work is hard and it does require self-awareness, but it's important and powerful work.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Raleigh and Smita. Lots of great tips and good takeaways for folks to bring back to their teams. So if you're curious about more change management tools that you can apply to your next project, we have a new guide up on our site, and it is the Nonprofits Guide to Change Management. That guide also includes some downloadable worksheets that you can bring to meetings. And then there's just lots of different change management resources on teamheller.com. So go ahead and bookmark that site, sign up for our emails so that you can get the latest change management tips that we're learning from our projects. And then Smita and Rally were kind enough to share their email addresses with us. So if you have a specific question about a project that's coming up, feel free to shoot them an email and we'd be happy to connect with you. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Smita and Rally.